All right, I'm Wes Holland. This is my persuasive speech, and here's my audience. Okay. In 2014, I was at the Castleton Square Mall in Indianapolis with my family going to see the movie Into the Woods. About 15 minutes into the movie, a group of kids came running into the theater, making a bunch of noise, and another audience member was like, "Hey, shut up! We're in a movie. Come on!" And this 13-year-old kid responded by saying, "They shooting out there." And at this point, everyone realized, it was, oh. So everyone laid down in between the seats of the movie theater, and I laid on top of my sister. I guess I'm a human shield right now. And we waited, and after a couple minutes, an employee came in, told everyone to leave through the emergency exits. Got outside, and there were cops everywhere responding to reports of shots fired in front of the movie theater, but they didn't find any suspects. And for the first time in my life, I felt defenseless and feared for my safety. So for the past 4 years, there have been bills proposed in the state of Indiana for that would allow constitutional carry. Constitutional carry is when a state allows their citizens to conceal carry a firearm without having to obtain a permit. We live in a world that's full of dangers, and in a country where the Declaration of Independence says that all men have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and we have a Bill of Rights that guarantees the right to bear arms. Constitutional carry should be allowed for the average American to protect themselves. So why does Indiana specifically need constitutional carry? So in Indiana, the biggest 911 call center is losing dispatchers at an alarming rate. They're saying it's mainly due to not being able to pay them. The call volume is so high that if every seat isn't filled, they're not maximizing their capabilities, and that leads people waiting, which could be a life or death situation. Emergency response services take a long time to respond in Indianapolis. A few weeks ago, I was at a gas station, and an employee and a customer got in a fight. It was rough, and we called the cops, and it still took them 15 minutes for them to show up and leisurely walk in. Another thing goes with why constitutional carry needs to be upheld. So, in a court case, Puerta versus the County of San Diego upheld a policy requiring concealed carry permits concealed carry permit applicants to show an exceptional need for self-defense, holding that concealed carry is not protected by the Second Amendment. But in the Supreme Court case, District of Columbia versus Heller, the judge in that case did a historical analysis of the Second Amendment and concluded that concealed carry of a firearm is protected by the Second Amendment. So, Americans, guns, 2015 Gallup poll found that 56% of Americans believe that America would be safer if there were more people concealed carry firearms, which is a big change compared to 10 years ago where they did a similar study and only 27% of Americans did it. So, we've got a Supreme Court case that concludes that the Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms for self-defense in public. 56% of Americans think that America would be safer that way, and we've got Indiana's busiest 911 call center being understaffed. So why is constitutional carry such a controversial subject? So, basically use West Virginia as an example. West Virginia passed the constitutional carry bill, and the reactions to it kind of show why it's so controversial. The president of the West Virginia Citizens Defense League said, "Since the passage of the constitutional carry, we haven't seen the blood in the streets anti-gun narrative that people have said was going to happen." And this is a common phrase that I found while researching constitutional carry because people who oppose it believe that it will lead to more violence. But when comparing data from 2015 to 2016, in West Virginia, there was not a significant increase in gun-related crimes. Some counties went up, some went down, and Lieutenant Dan Underwood of the Huntington Police Department says it's because nothing happens in a bubble, and says the violence that went up in his county was related to drugs. Quote, "I can't say constitutional carry had anything to do with it when we've got heroin, which I know had something to do with it." A book written by John Lott in 1998 was called More Guns, Less Crime. And, a lot of people use that as a, information that they're using as advocate for gun rights. But more guns, less crime is a pretty misleading simplification of the relationship between concealed carry and public safety. A study in 2016 came out saying that the United States accounts for nearly a third of all the mass shootings in the world. Professor Adam Lankford, who conducted the study, is not disclosing the data that he used to come to this conclusion, but the guy who wrote that book, John Lott, used research from the University of Maryland's Global Terrorism Database, which is free and open to the public, to conclude that the U.S. is 58th in the world for mass public shootings. Now, so it seems like there's a lot of conflicting and biased information coming from both supporters of constitutional carry and opponents. What has Indiana been doing to solve the constitutional carry problem? Well, State Representative Jim Lucas has been advocating for constitutional carry for the last 4 years. This year, he voted yes for the amended constitutional carry bill that it doesn't allow constitutional carry, but it removes the fees in obtaining a lifetime permit. He said he's going to continue to fight for the restoration of our constitutional rights, but this is a step in the right direction. Another step in the right direction that Indiana's making was the passing of the domestic violence survivor gun law that went into effect in 2017. The law allows survivors of domestic violence that fill out a protective order, or file a protective order to carry a firearm in self-defense without a permit for 60 days, which I don't think is really enough time, but it's definitely a good step towards protecting people. So, in conclusion, Indiana's making great steps towards joining the 13 states that have already allowed constitutional carry. Obtaining a permit to conceal carry takes time and money, and people should not have to pay or wait for safety in a world where violence is around every corner. Cool. And there we go.